Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and I've discussed a number of aspects of the consequences of the general election results, and there'll be more to come as well. There are an awful lot of threads leading from this. But today, I have to discuss Labour, the Labour leadership, and the way forward for Labour, if indeed it can move forward, as I am a Labour supporter, beyond just Labour being the only party that could possibly have stopped Boris Johnson's New World Order. I am a Labour supporter at all times, and so it's particularly close to me. So we're going to begin with Jeremy Corbyn's fake apology. Various headlines will be saying that Jeremy Corbyn has finally apologised. It took till Sunday to write in a couple of Sunday papers that have supported him, the Observer and what was the other one? The Sunday Mirror, wasn't it? And it's not an apology at all when you read it. At all. And you sort of know this because, when my girlfriend said, oh, Jeremy Corbyn's apologised, because I was going on all weekend about the fact that he hasn't even had the decency to apologise. Every single party leader, not just Labour leader, Conservative or Labour leader, whenever they lose a general election, they immediately apologise to their supporters. They show some humility to the people who are especially in December. They've been out in all weathers for free, volunteers, knocking on doors, trying to persuade people to vote Labour. And whenever you're the party leader of the party that ultimately loses, those people were having a much rougher time of it because it's more difficult to persuade people because ultimately you lost. And that is what has been happening. And to express no apology because those people had a difficult time, not because they themselves were not being persuasive enough. Some of them naturally will be, some of them naturally won't be, but it won't be because of that. It's ultimately the direction of the national leadership that either makes a canvasser's job hard or light. And I was saying all weekend, this is absolutely appalling that he hasn't actually apologised. Then she said, oh no, he's apologised now, read this. So I read it because that was suspicious. Because whenever someone apologises, sometimes it's an actual apology. And an apology consists of a few strands. It consists of, first of all, you are quite clear about the fact you are apologising. You explain who you're apologising to and for what reason. Otherwise, what it is an expression of regret. It's not an apology. It's an expression of regret. And that's exactly what his letter was. The apology part of it could be put down to this. It says, we have suffered a heavy defeat and I take my responsibility for it. Now, a lot of people are looking at the exact wording of that and then saying, that's not taking responsibility, is it? You say you're taking my responsibility, as in, and some people have paraphrased by calling it my share of the responsibility. And okay, you didn't use the word share, but that's still what the wording means, just to be clear. If it had just said, I take full responsibility for it, that's taking responsibility. Well, at least it's saying you're taking responsibility. I take my responsibility for it. In other words, he's saying there's a responsibility pie. A tiny little sliver is his. Oh, I'll accept that little bit. And then you have to read the rest of the letter to see whether he's really apologising or not. No, he's not. He's saying he's proud of the campaign. He's proud of the campaign that saw Labour with its worst defeat since before the Second World War. He's proud of that campaign. He's proud that Boris Johnson now has a massive majority. This is the worst Conservative Prime Minister there's ever been from a moral standpoint. And I'm going to have to go through that in a few videos next week as well. He's proud of that. What? And he went on to say in the letter, he says, I am proud that on austerity, on corporate power, on inequality, and on the climate emergency, we have won the argument and rewritten the terms of political debate. This is pathetic. This is someone trying to cling onto having some sort of legacy. Oh, I want this legacy. He hasn't done any of those things. If he'd have won the debate on any of those things, because I guarantee the vast majority of people voting in that election are against austerity. They're against corporate power. They are certainly against inequality because most of them are on the unhappy side of inequality and they are against the damage that we're doing to the climate. They are against all of those. You only had to win one of those arguments and Labour would have done much better. But no, they won none of them. They won none of them. They were right on all of them. That is not the same thing as winning an argument. Winning an argument is about persuading people that you are right, not being right. Being right is irrelevant in politics. No one gives a crap who's right, only who you think is right. Labour lost. They lost. They lost very badly. Extremely badly. And that means that they lost the argument. And that's all there is to it. And various membership, or members of the leadership, I should say, or those controlling the leadership, like Len McCluskey of the largest union, and they were insisting that the problem was that Labour weren't Brexity enough. Oh yeah, that's the problem. Labour have actually gained. I did the video yesterday, but let's just be clear on this. Polls have been accurate. Polls have demonstrated themselves, the good ones have been demonstrated themselves to be accurate. Those same polls showed Labour gaining whenever it backed, when it first of all backed a referendum, it gained. It gained as the further it moved away from being a Brexit party, the better it did. And this is obvious because we also know that the vast majority of Labour voters and Labour supporters and Labour members, which are not always the same things, are backing Remain. There are some so-called Lexiteers, so that's an absolute nonsense. This is Len McCluskey and other members of the Corbynista who are basically not wanting to admit that they were wrong, because if they admit that they were wrong, they have to bugger off, and that's what they need to do. And if they won't do it by themselves, they have to be made to. Because the problem is that these various people are all saying that Labour will learn lessons. No, they will learn nothing. They learned nothing after 2017. They were cock-a-hoop. They thought they won in 2017. In case you hadn't noticed, Theresa May was still Prime Minister. That means you lost. That means you lost. And they'll learn nothing this time. In fact, by what they're saying, they'll learn nothing this time. They've been blaming everyone. Everyone but themselves. Literally everyone. The people who actually need to learn the lessons, because the people around Corbyn and that have been around Corbyn will not. They've already demonstrated that they've learned nothing. The people who need to learn lessons are the people who knew that Jeremy Corbyn was going to bring them defeat and gave up too early. It's not that they did nothing, they did. And I have to be clear about this. They issued a vote of no confidence in Corbyn's leadership, and he was defeated heavily. By the party rules, that should have been it. He's gone. There should have been different leaders on the ballot paper to be selected for the new Labour leader. He should have been gone. But because he'd already padded out the National Executive Committee with his stooges, they just basically went, no, it's not against the rules. And they also meant he didn't even have to go through the rounds of voting to get onto the final ballot. He was just automatically in the final. Both of those things were against the Labour Party rules at the time. And so he forced themselves on him. So what they did is they gave up because they thought to themselves, well, there's no point in having a civil war in Labour because that's not going to help us. We just have to hold faith with him. And they did. Do not blame anyone. And these people they're blaming these MPs for undermining Corbyn's leadership. I'll say two things to that. First of all, he has no moral authority to expect any MP to do what he says, because he never did with previous Labour leaders. Going back, Michael Foot was the last Labour leader that he as a backbencher ever had any respect for. He's never had any respect for any of the five since. None of them. Not one. And he has no moral authority to have expected that. But the other thing is they didn't undermine him. When they failed to unseat him, they just got behind him. They didn't let him get away with anything. They didn't go around saying how brilliant he was. Of course not, because he's not. They're not stupid. But they didn't undermine him, not once. Okay, so they didn't... so that's all nonsense. The other thing is, when they get the new leader, it has to be someone with no links with Corbyn. If the new leader ends up being someone who's effectively his pick, Labour have no chance in the next... They're already up against it. Actually, if they get a very good leader, they're up against it next election, because Boris Johnson has already begun putting in place things that will make it much more difficult for even a good leader. A half-decent leader would have walked it this time. In fact, actually, I'll be honest, anyone that wasn't Jeremy Corbyn would have walked it this time. He was the number one issue by some distance. Anecdotal evidence from canvassers says that, but polls say that. The much more reliable polls say that. And they need to, if Len McCluskey doesn't like it, if he doesn't like a new leader, then they're just going to have to say, well, I'm sorry that you don't want to support the Labour Party, and do without that union. That's the largest union. I don't know how much it contributes to the Labour coffers. I'm sure it's a fair amount. They have to do without that money. And I know some people say, well, that's easy to say. Yes, it is, because every penny that came to Labour from the unions or from individual donations was wasted. Every penny of it. I mean, I pay my Labour membership, and I actually pay more than when you become a member, you can opt to pay a bit more. I pay more. They've been fine. They can have that, and they can still have that. I have not made any further donations to the Labour Party for the last couple of years, and I have on to local parties, to local organisations a bit, but not to the national leadership. And that's the reason, because I know every penny of it is going to be wasted, because they are refusing to campaign in the way that they should. But it's another video in terms of what they really need to do in terms of future campaigning. But, the facts of the matter are that these people that are defending Corbyn, they're not actually defending Corbyn. Whenever I actually talk to them for any length, ultimately it comes down to his policies. They like him because they like his policies. You're blind. Never judge anyone on their policies, only on what they do. His policies, if he doesn't attach himself to them, can be carried forward by a new leader. I fully supported all of the Labour manifesto. They were policies that had top economists praising it. Every single one of those policies would have been a good one to take forward. But every single one of the policies in that manifesto was worthless. And the reason for that is that not a single one of them could ever be enacted. Because he cannot get power. Jeremy Corbyn is incapable. He had a golden opportunity to get power in the last Parliament. Turned it down. Turned it down flat. So, the take home from this at the moment is Jeremy Corbyn is faking an apology. He hasn't apologised to anyone. He hasn't shown any remorse whatsoever for what he's done, for the damage he's now inflicted upon the country. He's not an honest man. He's an intensely dishonest man. He's not even a nice man. I agree that he is a person who thought he had the best interests of the country at heart, but he's also a person who knew he was going to lose. He knew he was unpopular. He knew all these things and he stayed on anyway. So I'm going to say that although he thinks that he had the best interests of everyone at heart, and certainly his policies suggest that, he knew he was going to lose. He knew it. And he still did nothing. And that's his legacy. His legacy, whatever happens over the next 5 years, and if, you come and have a discussion with me in a couple of years after you've seen 2 years into a Boris Johnson majority, whatever happens over the next few years is Jeremy Corbyn's legacy, not Boris Johnson's even. So I hope you found the video interesting anyway. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. Also, don't forget to slag me off if you're a Corbyn fan. And I will get back to you if I can. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then also please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.